we want to welcome all of you. And for those of you that aren't familiar with the Endangered Wolf Center, we host a speaker series that has gone virtual. So what you're seeing is the virtual version of that speaker series. And we're a conservation and educational AZA accredited nonprofit organization. So we specialize in wolf and other wild canid conservation and education, and we're based in Eureka, Missouri. So right outside of St. Louis, you know, the big arch. If you're not from around here, we're nearby there. My name's Victoria Ziegler. I'm the creative producer and marketing specialist with the Endangered Wolf Center. I'm really excited to introduce our guest speaker, Brad Clement. Brad has spent nearly 20 years as a professional mountaineer and high-altitude filmmaker, which is just a cool title, right? That's just fun. And after more than 16 expeditions to the Himalayas, Brad has developed a desire to give back to the mountain communities where he has developed this lifelong love of wildlife. So he was inspired to create the Pangje Foundation. I'll also be putting some links in the chat as we go along. So like I'm gonna put one there now and you all can tell me if you see it. I'm gonna put a link to the Pangje Foundation and hopefully you can all see that.
I see it.
Well, good. That's a good start. So thanks everybody for joining us. I wanted to talk, Brad, a little bit about your lifelong love of wildlife and how do you think that kind of began for you? And we just kind of want to go over a little bit of your background of how that developed.
Yeah, so for everyone listening, I think, Victoria, you know this, I grew up in St. Louis and I'm a Midwestern kid really at heart. And we were fortunate enough to have a farm in Missouri, a cattle ranch. And as a kid, I spent every second I could on our farm. And that was the impetus into really loving wildlife, loving the great outdoors, Mother Nature. So in a strange full circle, St. Louis is where it began, and I still, quite honestly, I consider St. Louis my home still. My parents, my sister, my nephew, they're all still there. They all live, typical St. Louis. They all live a mile or less away from each other. So it was time in the Ozarks, time in the wild places in Missouri that really began my interest, that developed into a real passion for wild places, wilderness, and that's where it started.
Yeah, and you have an interesting tie to the Endangered Wolf Center as well. You were able to visit as a kid?
That's right. So Victoria and I kind of jumped on a call before we're doing this, and we just caught up and learned a little bit about each other. And one story I shared with you, Victoria, is I remember as a kid, third, fourth, fifth grade, like little kids, we would do field trips to the Endangered Wolf Center. And we thought it was so cool. And at that time, we thought Eureka was so far out there.
Yes, I did too. I thought the zoo was really far away.
Yeah. And so we would go out there and we would watch the keepers, I guess they're called. We would watch them feed the wolves and try to make them howl and do all these things. And I don't think this would even be remotely possible today, but we had a guy who worked or somehow was associated with the center come to our school, and he would bring a wolf with him, a live wolf that was his partner.
His partner, yeah, his ambassador.
Yeah, and it was so cool. And I still have, he wrote a little book, and I still have that book.
Wow. So it made a big impact.
Yeah, it did. It did. And, wild animals, for me, particularly predators, apex predators, carnivores, have always been really fascinating because of their elusiveness, what they go through, the low percentage of success in trying to live. It's always just fascinated me. And quite honestly, it's also the intensity in their eyes. And, there's just something going on inside of them that is just wild and so cool.
Yeah, yeah. I think I visited the Endangered Wolf Center the first time. I think I was maybe 9 years old. And
Hmm.
I always remember seeing that wolf on the hill. It was really far away. And I think maybe we had binoculars. But I think, yeah, I had begged my mom to take me there. And it's funny because even being out there now for events and different things, I'll meet kids like that find out that it exists in St. Louis and are just kind of drawn, which is always, we'll talk a little bit later about getting kids involved in conservation, but that's something that's just super rewarding to hear. And so you have this kind of background, but how did you transition and take that leap into high altitude filmmaking and mountaineering? How did that kind of transition?
Yeah, well, as you may know, St. Louis is the mecca of high altitude mountaineering, so it was a natural progression. But no, in all seriousness, uh, I did not get into mountaineering until after college, and I did not even go to college in a place that was remotely close to mountains. I went to college in Indiana, so I just went to a more flat place from St. Louis. But right after college, I went. One of my best friends and I went to Denali National Park, and we washed buses for the Park Service, and we fell in love with at the time it was called Mount McKinley. Now it's more officially known as Denali, highest mountain in North America. We fell in love with the whole Alaska range, and so I began taking courses in mountaineering, and then I evolved that into becoming a professional guide. And so I kind of cut my teeth on smaller mountains, and finally kind of got a job as a guide, and worked for many, many years full time as a guide, like 9 months out of the year on a tent, in a tent
Wow.
on some mountain somewhere. And so through that process of guiding and leading expeditions, I thought, we should film this stuff, the human stories of, of emotion and struggle and accomplishment that happens on mountains is remains to me this day is really something fascinating and special. So I just picked up a camera and kind of started filming, and eventually started calling myself a cameraman. And 20 years later, it's become my profession. I actually still guide. I still guide somewhat, but the majority of what I do is adventure filmmaking and films and video and media that revolves around either remote wilderness or still to this day mountaineering.
Wow. So I want to share my screen and just kind of maybe you can tell us. So this picture that was on our little event cover, where is this?
That's in Colorado.
That's in Colorado. Okay.
Yeah, that's in Mount Evans in Colorado.
Okay. I was curious. And yeah, I noticed that some of these photos, it appears that there you are. You've got some rope. What's happening there?
So if you stay on that one with the snow, or we can talk about this one. That's the same place. That's Mount Evans, and we were just kind of having
Oh,
fun
okay.
and goofing around. The next photo with the
Uh-huh.
snow and the high peak,
Yeah.
I'll let you navigate to it. Yeah.
Okay.
So that is where the climber is, and the climber's name is Will Cross. That was in 2004, and Will is standing at about 24,000 feet on Mount Everest. And what you see behind you and to the left on the screen is the summit of Mount Everest. Actually, it's the south summit, but that's essentially the summit of Mount Everest. And
Wow.
so that was my first time ever to Everest, and I've been lucky to spend a lot of time in the Himalayas, and just naturally kind of became a second home, a passion. And that's what that pick is. It was the beginning. It's
Yeah, and
funny.
you
I've never thought about this. This photo encapsulates the beginning of my love affair with Nepal and the Himalaya.
wow, really. That's such a neat that's why, being photo and video people, I think we can both appreciate like when you take kind of a retrospective look at it, it's just for me, I can it's hard to get that gauge of how high up you are and all of that. So that's why I wanted you to kind of dive into what's going on in some of these photos. And I remember you talking about that phrase, that love affair with the Himalaya, and why do you think it is that you're pulled back? I think in your bio it said 16 expeditions. Is that that seems like a lot over the course of the 20 years. It sounds like you're there a lot.
I think it's probably up to 20 or more now. I mean, it's a place I go. Before the pandemic, I was there probably twice a year for most years. So yeah, why the love affair? It's such a complicated answer, but I'll try to simplify this. At first, it began because of the mountains, and the Himalayas, Nepal in particular, holds the highest mountains in the world. So that was it. That was the draw, and that was also my profession. But what I
Mm-hmm.
found over time is I really fell in love with the people, the culture. It's so exotic. It was so different from anything I'd experienced growing up in St. Louis. It was so different from things I'd experienced spending time in the outdoors in the Ozarks. And yet it shared this wild feeling. And the people are beautiful. They're so different. They're so wonderful, and they're so kind, and they have almost nothing. They're so poor in general. They're so poor, and yet they remain kind and giving. And so over the years, I found myself falling more in love with going back every year to see friends, to experience the culture. The mountains became a side benefit. It also still was my profession, so I was working, and I still love the mountains, but the people, places, and events with friends who are from Nepal really won my heart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're making me want to visit. So, and some of these photos too. And we saw a little sneak peek of a snow leopard shot. There was sharing the screen. And so I want to talk a little bit about snow leopards because we probably have some wolf lovers in the audience from our following that might not know a ton about snow leopards. So, can you give us some fun facts and some basics, and just kind of talk a little bit about what it's like working with snow leopard conservation?
Yeah, so snow leopards, to me, and I would love to at some point talk about how in the world I got involved with this to begin with, but snow leopards to me have always been this enigmatic ghost of the mountains. They're super rare. Like any big cat, they're super elusive, and they're gorgeous. There's this romantic attraction to their simple beauty. And so for me, I just fell in love with that cat way before I began Pangje and started working in the conservation. But in general, so I'm going to relay it back to our big cat here in the United States, the mountain lion. Snow leopards are generally a little smaller than mountain lions. They often look bigger because they're so furry, but they're a little bit smaller. Their tails are much longer. Their tails can actually be as long as their main body. And their tail acts in a lot of cool ways. Yeah, it balances them as they jump and run through these super steep, icy environs in which they live. But they also often use their tail to fold over their eyes and their face because it's so cold and snowy where they live.
Oh,
So it's kind of
wow.
cool how they evolve and do things. Uh, what a lot of people don't know, and I think it's so cool, is yes, they're called snow leopards, but they're essentially a tiger. They're much more closely related to tigers than anything in the leopard family. Uh,
Yeah, and I did not know that.
yeah, yeah, it's kind of neat. Genetically, they're kind of tigers, and you know their their athleticism is amazing. They can jump something like 50 feet in one leap. That's imagine a city bus. I mean, that's how far they can jump.
Oh, wow.
So they're incredible animals. They don't roar. They can't roar like a lion or a tiger, but nor can a mountain lion.
Hmm.
And yet mountain lions and snow leopards both purr, which other big cats generally don't do. So yeah, there are all sorts of little peculiarities that are really cool about them.
Yeah, and we kind of talked about how they're similar to wolves in the sense that they're both apex predators,
Mhm.
and in their ecosystem, that means that they play a huge role. And everyone tuning in probably knows how important saving these apex predators is to the environment. What are some of the biggest challenges that you see for snow leopards?
I would say the parallels are very similar with wolves as they are with snow leopards. It's the human predator conflict. And all across Central Asia, which is the home range for snow leopards, people are expanding where they live. And as we encroach on traditional habitat for these predators, there's going to be conflict. That's really the biggest risk. Uh, Climate change, everything also feeds into that. A really interesting fact is many people don't know that the common leopard, like the leopard you see in Africa, the black and yellow leopard, they're prevalent in Nepal and the Himalaya.
Hmm.
As climate change warms up these mountains, vegetation starts to go into higher elevations where that form of vegetation has never been, which means prey species start moving up, which means the common leopard starts moving up. They are out competing snow leopards. They're larger, they're more aggressive, et cetera, et cetera. So I digress, but the really the greatest threat to most apex predators is human interaction and human conflict. For Nepal in particular, it's the goat herders. These livestock owners will see massive loss of livestock because of predation from snow leopard. And so that's always a challenge in working with communities and not judging them. You know, we I think oftentimes here in the States, we can sit on a pedestal and judge people for how they feel about predators because, like I said, I have a romantic image of snow leopards that I just love, but they are a predator and they kill animals and they kill the livelihood of people who are on the fringe of economic survival anyway. So yeah, we work with a lot and there are just a lot of struggles. At the same time, as you pointed out, apex predators are the single most important factor in any healthy ecosystem, and they preserve biodiversity. They do such incredible things in a trickle down manner. And like wolves, I've seen videos of wolves after the reintroduction into Yellowstone. And I know you guys deal with Mexican wolves, but the gray wolves in Yellowstone, what they've done to reestablish this equilibrium of nature is incredible. And that's what happens. They are such an important facet in a healthy world.
Yeah. Yeah, so I want to ask you a little bit about the Pangje Foundation because
Yeah.
we're talking about some of these challenges, and it kind of feels like you saw some issues and you thought we could help this. So how did that kind of come about, and how did that all get started?
Well, I wish I was that important. Sadly, I'm really not. Uh, so this whole thing, Pangje, and Pangje, by the way, is it's a Nepali slang term for snow leopard. So Pangje means snow leopard. Excuse me. But this all arose out of my work as a filmmaker, and I happened to read about this guy, Dr. Som Ale. It was in National Geographic, and Som is Nepali, born and raised, and he was doing these very, what you might call simple conservation programs. He was taking school kids from Nepal, from mountain villages, into the mountains for multi-day camping trips, if you will. And he was teaching them snow leopard conservation. Som is probably easily one of the top one, two, three snow leopard experts in the world. What he really wanted to do and what he wanted to achieve was helping communities, helping people, and helping the youth, the next generation, become stewards of the environment, of endangered species conservation, but also of their own cultural heritage. And in all of this, also provide livelihood, long-term sustainable livelihood opportunities through ecotourism, through saving these cats, through saving the environment. And so snow leopard conservation absolutely were and he was working to save snow leopards, but it was through that vehicle of snow leopard conservation that he was really helping the people too, and incorporating community based conservation. So I read about this guy. I write him a note. I asked him if I could film him. And it's a really long story. He kind of blew me off at first. And then all of a sudden, I found myself filming him in Nepal. And my whole idea was to film a documentary about what he was doing.
Mm-hmm.
It ended up, we became great friends. He is a fantastic human, just a fantastic person. And we decided to start Pangje Foundation and continue his incredible, simple, but broadly, deeply effective programs with these kids in Nepal.
I love that. I love that story, and I love that he kind of blew you off at first.
Totally, totally. And now we're talking like multiple times a week for how many years now? So it's a that whole story is quite hilarious. But here we are continuing his work. He now lives in Chicago. He's a professor at the University of Illinois, and he's not only a fantastic wildlife biologist, he's a fantastic educator, and he cares so deeply about these communities in Nepal and teaching kids. And so you can't really do much if you effectively in conservation if you don't build trust and build a genuine relationship with communities, and he's a master at that.
So what is happening in some of these images here? Can you see this?
Yeah. Okay, so the top left, I often wonder where these kids are. So these are not kids from any of the programs Pangje is putting on. These are kids that I took a photo of in probably 2005, 2006 in Nepal. And these were some of my first experiences with like the youth of the Himalaya.
So
And
this is kind of while you're falling in love with the whole
exactly,
region.
exactly. And I often wonder, like, where are these kids today? It's getting on in years. They're young adults now, and I would love to track them down and give them that photo. But that is literally one of my first kind of experiences and emotional connection to people and communities in Nepal. Moving to the right, photo of these little kids. I love that. They're wearing the traditional Tibetan garments. This is in the village of Phu. And Phu is one of the more remote locations in Nepal. And it's where we do much of our work right now. And these little kids are awesome. And look how tough they are.
Mm-hmm.
Phu is not an easy place to get to. It's not an easy place to live in. And they do it with style. And so these are literally some of the kids that will eventually, hopefully, be in our programs and learn about their own backyard. And then moving back down lower left, these are some of the current, this was just taken last November. These are some of the young women that we're actively teaching and actively taking through our environmental courses. I love this photo because, well, I love it for a few reasons. You can see one of them is on a smartphone, which
Mm-hmm.
I just think that's such a great commentary. They, the modern world is the modern world, no matter how far out of normality it may seem for us. Even way out there, people are fascinated with technology and smartphones. But more importantly, it shows that girls and women's education is a real priority for us in Nepal and in many places around the world. women and girls don't receive educational opportunities that their male counterparts do. We have it pretty easy here in the States, and still it's not totally equal, but we really pride ourselves and stress our programs to be inclusive. And it's a hurdle to jump through that don't see why we would want to do that. And so it further drives our relationships with government agencies, with communities, and the end result is boys and girls learn together, they grow together, they respect each other, and they gain these amazing worldviews that they would not otherwise have.
So what does a typical program look like? What goes on? And I can see some cameras and some binoculars here, but what are they doing?
So right here in this photo, again, lower left corner, they are counting prey species. And in this part of Nepal, and largely this part of the Himalaya, the major prey species outside of domestic goats are blue sheep. And they are counting, they're doing a survey, helping our biologists do a survey to count prey species density.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's see. I have some videos here that I want to share, but before I do, feel free to, they don't have any sound on them, I don't think. So if you want to kind of describe what's going on while we're watching it, there's a couple of these that feature some snow leopards that I thought would be fun to look at and talk about how you're getting this footage, how you're working with the communities by capturing this stuff. So I'm going to play it.
So this is a mom and a cub. They're actually two cubs, but we only see one in this clip. And this is, again, north central Nepal, near the town of Manang. And so she's scraping. They leave their little scent messages to other cats. And I just love that cub.
They're so cute.
Yeah, yeah. And then this next video you're going to show is such a cool place. This is a cave along the Kali Gandaki River in, again, north central Nepal. This is a mom. We have photos of her cubs, but again, you'll see her activity. She's scraping, and she's going to rub her scent mark on this rock. They have to travel through this cave because it's right along the river. And so to answer your questions, how do we get these cameras out here, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. One of the aspects of our youth programs is, and our programs are taught and participated by all Nepali. So our biologists are from Nepal, the teachers that join the biologists, the rangers that join the biologists, they're all from Nepal.
Oh, wow.
And the kids are from Nepal. So it's a really cool Nepali working with Nepali.
Yeah.
Oh, we'll get to that one soon. But these first two videos, part of our educational programs is through our biologists and snow leopard experts. They take the kids out and they set up camera traps, or as we commonly call them, trail cameras. And we set them up, and the biologists know where and how to set them up, and then help the kids see how to do that. And then the kids, along with their local school teachers, continue to monitor those cameras so that every couple weeks, every month, they all go out as a group and they pull out the SD card, throw in a new SD card. And so that they're even past the days of the actual program, they're engaged and active in conservation activities. And those are just two examples of footage we got of cats. What's interesting is when we set those cameras up, the kids camped like a couple hundred yards away from those cameras.
Oh,
we
wow.
didn't see cats. There was no sign of cats other than what the biologist could tell was a good area. Literally the next day, those images were on the cameras. Those cats are around us, but we never see them.
Yeah, it's funny because at the Endangered Wolf Center, a lot of times we have these myths around predators and fears and all of this kind of folklore that surrounds these animals. And people are often very shocked to find out that wolves are really shy. They don't want to be around people. And I kind of wanted to ask you about some of that kind of cultural impact of how the culture in Nepal influences the way they view the predators and the snow leopards.
There's a big dichotomy in how these cats are viewed. In on one side, there's the reality that they kill goats, they kill livestock, they kill yaks occasionally. So they, it's the same all around the world. They're an apex predator and they kill animals. So there's that tension with people and animal. On the other hand, Nepal is this deeply spiritual place, largely Buddhist, and their values, their lore, their legends in their culture revere snow leopards. So again, I say it's a dichotomy. Uh, it's probably one of the only places in the world where snow leopard might come in and kill many, many goats, for example. And sometimes there are retaliatory killings of the cats, but usually because of this reverence for these animals, they still respect that cat. And I don't know anywhere else in the world where that is more common than not. And yeah, literally deep legends of the power and majesty of these cats is woven into the society and built into belief systems within this country. It's really special.
Yeah, that's incredible. That I remember when we first talked that really stuck out to me. And it influences too the way that you work with them and the way that you educate, I'm sure, and how you're communicating. To have that kind of background is just so fascinating. And I feel a little bit like some of these videos and images, it's like we're kind of traveling together and we're all kind of stuck. Most of us are unable to travel right now and feeling stuck. So I think it's a lot of fun. Can we talk about this one?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I'll play it. There's a little bit of audio, but not much.
I want to let it play and then talk.
Yeah.
So this was filmed just 2 months ago. It was filmed in December. And as you can tell, it's not really a trail camera. This is from a handheld camera. And our main guy, Kamal Thapa, he's our main guy in Nepal. He just literally happened to see this guy walking, and he literally has a little handheld point and shoot camera, and he turned it on to the video function. That's how close he is. He's
Wow.
30 to 50 yards away from this cat. And you can see the cat, he knows people are there. He's not freaked out. He's just getting on with his day. But that is so rare to see one in person and then be able to film so casually. I know the footage is great, but there are about anywhere from 3,000 to 6,000 snow leopards in the wild today. Nepal holds about 10% of that overall population. So it's a very critically important location for the survival of these cats. And if you, at the same time, if you think there are only 300 to 600 of these cats in the entire country, to just walk up on one and be able to film it, it was really, we were jumping up and down when.
Yeah, that's a moment. That's that's definitely, and the cat is kind of posing, it looks like.
Yeah,
here.
totally.
This is, are you sure this is not a trained snow leopard that just knows how to do this? And I did notice too with this footage, I was struck by how camouflage the cat is as it's walking through this terrain. That really struck me is, wow, that is a perfect camouflage right there.
Yeah, they're called snow leopards, but they really don't like the snow. They would much prefer these dry, arid, high mountain areas where their brown coat really blends perfectly.
Yeah, that's so cool. Yeah, that's a moment that he won't forget. Okay, here's this next short little clip. Oh, there's a couple of them here.
Yeah, these are just more trail camera pics. We think that was a young female. We don't really know. It's the same cat in all three pics. Uh, and they were all taken within about a week of each other. So that was her area at that time.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's awesome. Um, okay, I'm gonna stop my share so that I can come back and see. It takes over my whole screen when I do that, but it's worth it because like I said, we're kind of on a little traveling adventure to Nepal right now. um, so I wanted to talk a little bit more about the community work that you're doing, and can you kind of elaborate on what you're doing with these communities and some of the things that might seem a little bit outside of the realm of conservation? I know you mentioned some microfinancing projects. How does that kind of all play in and tie together to help the wildlife and to help the wild places?
So our cornerstone program is most certainly what we call our stewards program, and that's where we take the kids out on these essentially extended field trips. That specifically looks like 6 to 10 days out in the mountains with their peers, but also with these world leading biologists, teachers, park rangers, etc. Uh, that may sound pretty easy coming from the US or the Western world. These kids and their parents live hand to mouth. They're so disenfranchised, so generally poor. They don't know their own backyard. They don't know the mountains. They don't know anything about snow leopards or wildlife and the importance of biodiversity. So it's really, really cool to get these kids out there. What they learn is so far beyond just conservation. It's important for their entire community, and it gives them an outlook into the world that they did not have before. And there are no other educational opportunities like this in a country like Nepal. So yeah, that's our cornerstone program, and every day I'm just blown away again by it's simple in design, and its reach and its impact is so deep. What happens is these kids feel so cool about being able to have this educational opportunity that their siblings want to become part of the next year's program or whatever it may be. Their parents are so excited about what their kids are doing that the whole community begins to learn about snow leopards. That does several things. That means, in general, retaliatory killings lower, they lessen. It also means, yeah, physical, geographic safe spots, national parks, corridors for animals to move and live safely. They're crucially important. But by educating the kids and having that trickle up and down the generations, that also creates a social corridor of safety for these animals. And so when the community starts to accept that these animals are more important alive than dead, that opens up everything that happens when apex predators survive that we've talked about a little bit. I mean, they are the pinnacle of what keeps a healthy environment intact. And so it's really fascinating that just by helping these kids learn about conservation and getting them out in their own backyard that they would never otherwise do, the impact and the social and financial benefits to the communities is so cool. So that's our major program.
Yeah.
But yes, we do. It's not quite micro loan programs, but what we do is we also have these programs where Pangje Foundation will invest seed money in various communities. So we'll give them a few $1,000s, only if that community agrees to match our initial funds. So if we give them $2,000 or $5,000, whatever it may be, they have to match that right off the bat. And then it is up to them to decide how to use that money. Might sound odd, but some communities, for example, have bought a public bus with that money. What they do from there is they receive income from people paying to use that bus to go from community to community.
Mm-hmm.
So they invest and they receive growth of income off of that initial investment. Then what they do with that income is, for any livestock rancher, any person who is adversely affected by snow leopard predation, they help take care of that livestock loss through those funds,
Oh,
or
okay.
they invest in a conservation program within their school district. And so we give them tremendous latitude in what they want to do with that money, but we encourage them to invest it in ways that are going to have long-term benefits in a conservation realm.
Wow. Yeah, so it's all tied together, and I think that's something that's so important to translate into saving other species too,
Mm-hmm.
is that community involvement, that education side is huge, and we can do all the biology side we want, but if the education component isn't there, I think that that's something that is really special about the program that you're doing in Nepal. And I wanted to show this photo, this one where everybody's holding their hat.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Let me try to pull it up, and then you
Okay.
can tell me what it's about. Here, screen sharing. Let's see. Okay, can you see that?
Yes. So
Okay, there
so
we
I,
go.
I can describe this photo quite easily because I took the photo. But
Oh, good. That's easy.
so so these are kids in Som Ale's program. I mean, this is what he does. And so Som is the guy in the blue jacket in the lower right corner. And
Okay, this
you
guy.
can see, yep, that's
Okay.
Som. And you can see in kind of center, lower center, around, in between all those rocks that the kids are standing by, is a trail camera. And so this is one of the days where they set up a trail camera, and that was at about 14,000 feet near the town of Jomsom, Nepal. And during the monsoon, it was pouring nonstop. It was nasty weather, and these kids never paid any attention to the adversity they were facing. They're such amazing kids. And yeah, so that's one of the cameras that we set up.
And that's so neat that, in effect, you're kind of making conservation cool. That's what I'm hearing, is that like these kids are just going home and telling their families and telling their siblings, and it's becoming something that more and more people want to get involved in, just because I think it's pretty clear from the photo that they're very excited about it and they're enjoying the program and having fun with it. So I think that's a huge component too, is I've gotten the chance to just document some of the Endangered Wolf Center summer camps, and some of, just exploring a creek with a group of kids and looking for animal tracks, and all of that is something that, I know I didn't really get to do as a kid, so I probably would have been thrilled to go home and tell my siblings about it. So that's something really cool. And yeah, you can see this is where the trail camera is. I think you
Yeah.
guys can all see my little blue dot.
It's funny you mentioned making conservation cool. Hopefully we are doing that. But these kids at the end of this trip and at the end of the trips we do, they, on their own, maybe through a little guidance, because some of their local school teachers also accompany us. So they're with people they know quite well and mentors they know quite well outside of our biologists. They, on their own, create plays, like theater plays of predator and prey, natural things. And at the end of these environmental camps, we go back to the town center, and these kids put on these plays with the whole community. And
Wow.
it's really cool. And that's just another way to help foster this beautiful relationship with communities and have everyone, grandparents, parents, uncles, aunts, whoever it may be, get involved in what their kids are doing. And it's just super fun.
And I always like to kind of, we're getting to be, it's about almost 6:50. So if you guys have questions, please put them in the chat or in the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. It's usually along the bottom side of the window. But I wanted to we always like to kind of end these with some actionable takeaways of how can we get involved. This kind of seems across the world, quite literally, from a lot of us, but it's something that we can all have a part in, and conservation is clearly definitely not just all for biologists and people with certain degrees. We can all have a role. So do you have any advice for people that want to get involved in snow leopard conservation and conservation in their backyard?
Well, I'm the prime example. I am not a biologist. I'm a cheerleader. That's basically who I am. I just happen to fall in love with this particular part of the world, and then happen to meet the right people that allowed me to put some energy into helping. And I think it doesn't matter where you are, you can find something that connects with you and your heart, and help, whether that's through volunteer work, whether that's through financial funding, donations, or whether through that's learning and educating and getting your PhD in biology or whatever it may be. I don't think you have to be a scientist. You don't have to be the world's smartest individual. You can really just do organic grassroots activities. Maybe you start environmental camps with your kids' schools, and you take them to creeks in their backyards, and you just get people excited about nature. Because in all seriousness, at a certain level, when biodiversity becomes too simple, it's going to collapse. And so the natural world is what's keeping us all here right now. And I don't mean to sound fluffy about that. It's true. And we live in our homes. We have such creature comforts. At the end of the day, we're animals, and we're connected to the world because of that. And if the world is not healthy and nature is not healthy, we're all going to see those consequences. So I don't think you have to be a rocket scientist. I think you can do little steps.
Yeah, and one thing that I shared that slide with a couple of ideas about how you can get involved, and one thing on there was just to share in that education. So, we all have this amazing tool of social media at our fingertips of, maybe you have a blog, I don't know. There's so many ways that we can share in that education aspect, and just share something neat that you learned about snow leopards tonight. Share something, if you come out and visit us at the Wolf Center, share something that you learned, and an image. And, there's so many ways that we can kind of have that little piece of the puzzle. And I did see a question come in, so
Okay.
I wanted to, if you guys have found the Q&A feature, it looks like. So get your questions in. I saw one from Cliff and Martha. Does Brad speak the local language? So yeah, how does that work? Are you communicating? How are you doing that?
I'm horrible at the local language. I can say the pleasantries, and that's about it. And I'm embarrassed about that. I've thought about taking Nepali language lessons, but I haven't. The
And it's a
truth,
tough language.
it is a tough language.
Yeah.
It is not based off the Romance languages, like we all know. It is very tough. In all honesty, and maybe it's sad, maybe it's not. I don't know how to feel about it, but generally, everywhere someone speaks English, and they speak it pretty well. And certainly, the people we deal with at a upper level speak English. Even the kids that we deal with, they're taught English.
Really?
They're taught English in
Wow.
schools, and they speak English better than their parents do. And so no, I butcher the Nepali language whenever I try to speak it.
Well, I think I told you my couple of words that I know in Nepali, and it wasn't great because actually here in Missouri, in St. Louis, we have a Nepali, quite a Nepali population. So, we talked about Mark Cross, our executive director at the Endangered Wolf Center, and I were talking about this event, and we were saying, man, it would be great to do something to connect the Pangje Foundation and the Endangered Wolf Center, like, have our summer camp kids draw a picture of a snow leopard and send it to you guys or something, have some way where they can kind of share that. So we'll have to kind of brainstorm about how we can make that a reality, because I think that they're able to learn about what's in their backyard in the mountains, And, a lot of times with wolves, we're talking about animals that really should be in our backyard.
Mhm.
They're just not. They've been removed.
One of our major goals and next steps is to combine learning across countries and nations and continents. I think it would be fantastic to take kids from the US, either virtually or quite honestly in person, and have them share with the kids in Nepal in these camps that we do. And I mean, yeah, they'd learn about conservation, but they would learn so much more about themselves and culture and what binds us all together as a world. And
Hmm.
I think that the opportunities are endless.
And I think one thing that's neat about that idea is that I feel like we're inspired by how much the biologists care, by how much you care, but like we're inspired by that human connection. And so that's a really neat aspect of being able to share that and express, and like you said, through your films, through kind of telling those stories of the humans there, and that it's so connected to the wildlife
Mhm.
there. I did see another question come in from Linda. It says, in Africa, there is a program introducing dogs as livestock guardians, which is working well. Is that a possibility for people with their herds in Nepal? The conservation group subsidizes the program and dogs. So Linda said that she's coming from Chicago and has heard of this program. So that's an interesting idea. Have you heard of anything like that, or have you
We do a
explored that?
few kind of anti-predator education programs for livestock herders. And currently, what we're doing is two things. One is a simple system of just showing them how to fence the corrals where the goats go every night. And it's inexpensive and pretty, pretty productive. And it does a good job of protecting. The other thing is experimenting with these flashlights that when it picks something up, it's a sensor driven device. The super bright light starts going crazy and scares the cat away. We're experimenting with those two options. We've never done any work with dogs, and I think that's pretty interesting. Dogs are all over Nepal. Uh,
Hmm.
so that could be really interesting. Thank you for mentioning that.
Thanks, Linda. Good idea. And with with some of the similar issues that we find with wolves um, and cattle predation, just sometimes it's very simple solutions that seem almost too simple, and I think people kind of jump to a conclusion that can't work. It's just too easy. Like putting up, I think it's called flaggery. I always mess up how I say it, but putting things up that move and that frighten the animal away. It can be so simple, a shiny object, something that scares them because, like we mentioned earlier, these predators, they don't want anything to do with humans. They want to get away from anything that they're not certain about. So sometimes it's a very simple solution, and the dog idea is a good one. So
Yeah,
that
that's
you'll have to
interesting.
keep us posted. That's an interesting one. I saw another question come in from Carolyn. It says, what was it like initially getting the foundation off the ground?
It was. I'll try to use proper language here. It, it wasn't easy. It was like 60 pages of an application to the IRS. And these days, anytime you say you're going to be working internationally and there may be funds going to international resources, all sorts of red flags go up and you have to go through further hoops and
Ooh.
do a dog and pony show. But it was after we put together the initial application for a 501c3, which is the legal name identification for a charitable organization, which Pangje is, and which I'm sure the Wolf Center is. Uh,
Hmm.
Once we did that, it took a long time, and we had to write it well, and cross all of our T's and dot all of our I's. But after that, the acceptance to be a 501c3 came pretty quickly.
Wow. Yeah. So I'm going through the questions, and thank you for these. Those are great. I think that I answered the ones that I'm seeing in the Q&A feature. So if you have more, type them in because we're about to wrap up, so get them in. Brad, thank you so much for doing this and for chatting. And I did want to mention briefly that you have a podcast. So can you tell us a little bit about what's going on with that? And that's kind of how you and I were introduced.
That's right. That's right. So my very first interview for this brand new podcast for Pangje Foundation was with Regina Masadi, who works with the Endangered Wolf Center. We met years ago, and it was super fun to have her as our first guest. So our podcast is called Wild Places, and it's a brand new endeavor. I don't know how to interview people, but I'm learning as I go, and it's fun. So it's a way to promote conservation, but we kind of threw in a sexy hook of it's not just conservation. It's also people who are exploring remote, cool places in the world and just their experiences of why they fell into loving Mother Nature, the great outdoors, what drives them to do what they do, whether that is science and conservation or whether that is just adventure and finding your soul in cool places and wild places around the world. So that podcast, we've only done 6 episodes so far. They're not perfect. You know, it's the time of Zoom. There are technical glitches. Audio doesn't always work.
Always fun.
Oh yeah, it's nothing's always. I just did an interview the other day with a guy who wrote a book, Path of the Puma, Jim Williams. Jim is a wildlife biologist in Montana. He called me from the cab of his truck in the middle of the Bob Marshall Wilderness.
It's rugged.
That's how we did the interview, and so it's been fun, and I look forward to continuing it. It's currently, the video episodes are on our Pangje YouTube channel.
Okay.
And then we also have an audio version, kind of a traditional podcast, on most places you can find podcasts, Spotify, whatever it may be.
And I just shared a link. So in the chat, if you guys can click on the chat feature, you should see little red notifications popping up for you when I put things there. I just posted a link to the Spotify show so that you can navigate that and open it. And I'll also post a link to the Pangje Foundation YouTube channel. I didn't realize that there were video versions, so that's exciting.
And I believe Spotify, you have to download the app, but I believe it's free, as are most podcast apps, I think.
Okay, I see a couple more questions, so we'll just squeeze these in here right at the end.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, Barbara asked, are there any other groups doing work with snow leopards, and do you work with them?
Yes and yes. Around the Central Asia region where snow leopards call home, there are many organizations, several here in the US. It's funny, some NGOs, charitable organizations, are very jealous of others, and they don't want to work together. But we've always seen it as a beautiful partnership to be able to share and collaborate. So we do work with some other organizations. We absolutely work within the country of Nepal with local NGOs and the government organizations that focus on conservation. So it's a constant chess game of figuring out the best, most effective way to partner and learn together and grow together. But we absolutely do it. And yes, there are many other organizations that help snow leopards. So it's fantastic. It's a great community.
And that's more ways that you can get involved, everybody tuning in. Those are all different avenues. So like we mentioned, volunteering at a local wildlife rescue, or choosing an organization to support financially and offering a donation, becoming a member. I know the Endangered Wolf Center has memberships where you can get involved and kind of stay up to date on certain packs of animals. So those are all ways that I think a big part of it too is just developing that bond with a species. So if you adopt a certain animal or become invested in how they're doing, it's this kind of bond with a wild animal that we just don't really have an opportunity to create all on our own. We can't just go sit with them. I saw one more question pop up. Linda asked, Brad, you travel to Nepal frequently. How long and tough of a trip is that? Are there a lot of stops along the way? So what's that experience like?
Okay, so in general, the flight to Nepal, it's literally on the other side of the world. So it's, you know, the time zones are exactly opposite. So right now it's 6 a.m. in Nepal. Like,
Oof.
I'm in Colorado, so it's, you know,
So the jet lag is probably very
jet lag's
real.
pretty strong. Generally speaking, you take about 2 layover stops. So the common way we fly now is through the Middle East or through like Hong Kong. So you can go East Coast or West Coast. And if you're doing either of those, you're either going to stop, like if you're flying from St. Louis, Chicago, Colorado, you're either going to stop in New York or you're going to stop in LA or San Francisco. And then you go for a really long flight to either Hong Kong, wherever it may be, Japan, or like Doha or somewhere in the Middle East. And then you fly into Kathmandu. And so it's 36 hours. It's a long flying experience. And you cross the international date line. So, you know, it's a long flight. And then once you're there, you know, it's a developing country. Travel can be, it's adventure travel. And I always say that adventure travel is named appropriately. There's always adventure in your travel, which I love. But yeah, you know, I think that's part of it. It's exotic. There are a lot of unknowns, and I've just come to love that. We're actually leading a trip, kind of a snow leopard trek in May, and we're going to go to this village of Phu. We're going to have our biologists with us, and we're going to try to spot cats and take photos of cats. Who knows? I mean, the chances of that really happening are pretty rare, but you still experience all that culture and all the beautiful views and experiences of Nepal. So yeah, Nepal is fantastic. It's safe. You know, it's a safe country, generally speaking. It's just very much a developing world.
Well, I kind of want to go now. I'm very vacation wanderlust right now.
Yeah.
But okay, well, I want to wrap up because we're about 4 or 5 minutes over, but there was just so much good stuff to cover. I did post some links to get involved in the Endangered Wolf Center, our adoption program, to symbolically adopt a wolf. There's also a link to the Pangje Foundation, to their Get Involved page where you can learn more how you can get involved there. And if you scroll up a little bit, you'll find the podcast. So just a lot of ways to continue learning and be sure to, you know, stay involved, keep sharing what you're learning, however you can, and that's a huge part of conservation. So, you know, just being here, that's a big part too. So thanks so much, Brad. I'm glad that you could join us.
Thank you.
Enjoy your foot of snow.
Oh, I will. I'm gonna go
I'll
skiing.
stick to my like 6 to 8 inches. I'll be fine with that. Okay, well, thanks everybody for tuning in.
Yeah, thanks for watching and thanks for having me.
It was a lot of fun.
All right.
All right, I'm going to close it out. Thanks, everybody.